This is going to be a very, very simple salad. It's actually going to be solely dressed in balsamic vinegar and extra virgin olive oil, okay? Hopefully, what will happen is the vinegar, the bitterness from that with the sweet and the bitter from the berries will help make it work pretty well. You don't necessarily want to use a white vinegar or a cider vinegar. Balsamics or slightly different flavors tend to be much better for this. I went ahead and I started a little bit of fruit, but what basically we're looking to do is our larger fruits we want to chop down. Strawberries, we take the top and the greens off, and then we're going to cut them in half. And basically you're looking for similar pieces to what we did our rutabaga and a turnip from. You want something that you can bite without having to take multiple bites of. We'll get all this chopped in our bowl. Now the little ones, not so much. You can just cut them in half and then quarter them. The really big ones, go a little smaller with. Unfortunately, when you buy a quart of strawberries, you get what's ever in the quart. Get these last couple done real quick. Strawberries right now are very hit or miss. You have to be really careful with them when you're looking at them and you're buying them. Check the packages really well. And the best way to do it is to flip the package over and look at the bottom. If you see anything in there that looks wet or like strawberry juice or like red water, unless you're making jam with them and you're going to do it that day, don't bother, okay? Next thing we need to chop up is our blackberries. And again, we're not really looking to chop them up as much as we are looking just to cut them in half. They're just slightly large, okay, which is good, but we want to be able to enjoy them. And sometimes blackberries tend to be a little strong, so when they're that large, if you cut them in half, not quite so bad. Just want to cut them in half.
I never use balsamic on salads and fruit, but my two already prepared dressings that I like with fruit are poppy seed and raspberry vinaigrette.
Do you use the orange poppy seed or just a regular poppy seed?
Regular poppy seed.
There's one that's an orange poppy seed.
I haven't seen that.
It's got a slightly different flavor to it. Naturally, it's got some citrus in it. And then raspberry vinaigrette is good. They also have a lot of newer flavors. They call them superberry or super fruit dressings. And what it is it's a mixture of raspberries, blueberries, blackberries. They kind of combined everything together. And it's just got very similar to your raspberry flavor, but it's just got a little bit more kick to it. And it's a little bit healthier for you because it does mix a bunch of different berries in. Now, the downside to cutting blackberries, it makes a mess. If I didn't make a mess, I think Jess would wonder I was sick or not. And everything else. We're not trying to get it completely clean. We're just trying to get it so it's not slippery and slimy all over here. Now, an onion. Everyone's going to say, wow, that's a really big onion. I am doubling this, so this is double what we should be using, okay? I doubled all the fruit, spinach, everything, so it's not really that big of an onion. I just doubled it, I promise. An onion about 6 to 8 ounces. A small red onion is all you need. You want to make sure you peel layers off. Anything that's dry or really, really, really deep purple. See how that edge right there is much darker? That's because it's drying out. You want to make sure you peel that down. It's kind of like that skin on the pork. It'll be really, really tough. Same thing on this one. And you also want to make sure you peel any of that little in-between layers off. Mostly because it makes the onion very slippery and you tend to cut yourself a lot more when you're trying to hold on to it. With these, we want them slightly different shaped, so we're going to cut the back off. We're going to cut them down through the center, and we're just going to slice it across. So we get long, skinny slices. Once it gets to a point where it starts to lean, lay it down flat back on your cutting board, and then just do the same thing. And we can add all this in here too. We get rid of our ends. Again, just cut it across. Now when you're doing an onion that's round, if you cut straight up and down, your edges are going to be really thick, and then as it gets to the center, you're going to get thinner strips. So turn your knife to an angle and cut down, and then as you come up the product, straighten your knife out. And then once you get to the edge and you lay it back down, do the same thing. Turn your knife at an angle and come across, and then slowly start to straighten it back up. And what that does is it helps keep your onion slices more consistent. Instead of having one big edge, which is, ½ inch or 3/4 of an inch thick and real thin, it keeps it much more uniform. All right. Our last bit of chopping, and then I'm going to rinse that big bowl out real quick, is our mango. Is everybody familiar with mango? What did you think it was?
People thought it was a tomato. It was a tomato that wasn't right, the way the end of it looked. I hadn't read my recipe. It's not right. Oh, that's what it was.
It's not a ripe tomato, I promise. This is mango, okay? This is what it's supposed to look like, okay? It will turn more red depending on where it's at, depending on how long it's been in the sun. The way you tell if a mango is ripe is you squeeze the outside, okay? It should have, since you brought up tomatoes, a similar feel to a tomato. If you squeeze on it and it feels like this glass bottle, pick a different one, because that one will take at least a week to soften up and it will be bitter and sour, okay? When you squeeze these, it should be soft to the touch, but it shouldn't be so soft that when you squeeze it, you leave an indentation. If you can walk up to it and you push your thumb to it and you lift your thumb up and there's a big dent where your thumb was, it's overripe, okay? You want something that's soft but bounces back. Now with these, there's a giant seed in the center. So you want to cut the top and the bottom off and stand it up so it stays flat so you can work with it. And then you just want to gently peel down the outside. You're going to make sure you take all the green off of it. If you have a little bit of brown, try and cut through that as well. Most of the time, if you have brown on a mango that isn't really ripe, it's because 15,000 people picked it up and squeezed it to see if it was ready. Okay? Now, with this, I told you there's a giant seed in it, right? You're going to get about that much off each side because that's the seed. Okay? Now you can go down the edges a little bit and get a little more off that, but that's pretty much the whole seed. We want to chop this like we've chopped everything else. Make sure we get all that last little bit of skin off of there. Now this versus garlic is very slippery. The riper they get, the sweeter and the more juicy they get, the tougher they are to hold on to. All right, we have all that cut. I'm going to leave that seed there so those of you who don't know what a mango is can see how large it is. The reason I want to go with the largest bowl that I have is because I want to actually be able to mix this together. Now once it's mixed, we're going to put it in a much smaller bowl. But that spinach expands. I don't know how many people have played with fresh spinach or fresh lettuce in these little packed containers, but you can take this one whole pack and it's going to look like it's going to fill this whole bowl. Okay? So we want to make sure you have enough space to mix with. And then once we get it mixed down, we'll put it in a much smaller bowl so we can work with. Also, the nice thing about changing bowls is that you have to flip it over. And you take everything from the bottom of this big bowl and it then goes onto the top of the other bowl. Okay? Your vegetables, your fruit, whatever it is you're putting in your salad is always going to be heavier and it's always going to want to sink. Okay? As soon as you start mixing it, you go like this, the spinach comes up and everything else falls to the bottom. So do that and get the flavors all mixed together, and then as you put it into your other bowl, you put all your spinach on the bottom and then pile everything else on top. Now, we're going to start by adding our spinach. Again, spinach, like the spring mix, much less expensive in the larger containers. Okay? Triple washed, ready to eat, done and out of the package. Okay? You do not have to wash it again. If you feel the need to, by all means. However, all you get is wet spinach. Okay? They wash it and they dry it. It comes out very clean. Everybody see, it's just this one little container, right? It grows a little bit, right? Now, you do want to make sure there's always a little tiny leaf in there that goes bad before everyone else. But overall, pretty good. We're going to take everything that we've got chopped so far, and we're going to add that to it. We're also going to take our blueberries. Now with these, make sure you kind of pour them through your hand. They come out very clean. However, there's always a stem or two that get mixed in, or you get one little berry. It's not quite perfect. Same thing with our raspberries. Just make sure you're very careful with our raspberries. Okay, they crush very easily. So you want to go through them and make sure that they're all good and that there's no little green stems or leaves. But you don't want to smush them or smash them or be too difficult or too rough with them. I'll add the last little bit. That one had a flower on it. Okay, now that it's all in here, you want to kind of gently toss it. And that little bit of juice from the cut fruit, you can see, gets those spinach leaves wet. But also you can see everything we just put on top is now in the bottom, okay? Because you want to actually coat the spinach leaves with the fruit juices, you want to do it in two different bowls. Make sure you break up any onion chunks you get in there. Okay, now, with this one, you can control where it goes and how much goes in there. We can take all our fruit from the bottom and get it right back up on top. So you get that bold, bright colors in there, and you can see everything that's in it. We'll take our olive oil first. It's not science. You don't have to measure out exactly a quarter of a cup. You don't mix them together. I pour them on separately. And you basically don't want to coat it. You just want to drizzle it across the top, and it's going to soak down through. The reason I do the oil first is you use twice the amount of vinegar as you do oil, okay? Anytime you make a salad dressing or you make a vinaigrette, it's always 2 to 3 to 1, depending on how strong you want it. It's always less oil by at least double the vinegar, okay? When you do that, it helps wash your oil down through your product. So as you add this second, you pour twice the amount. It'll help blend that oil down, help mix it all together. Now your balsamic is a much darker one. We had talked before about aged balsamics. This one's relatively young, so it's pretty thin, and it pours relatively easy. If you were to get something that was thicker or more aged, you would want to use less because it's very sweet. And then you may have to actually mix them together. But with this one, because it is so young, it pours pretty easily, okay? We'll set the extra aside. We will need it, I'm sure. And with very little work, it's much healthier than 4 gallons of ranch dressing, which I know we're all guilty of. Jessica?
It was a lot of work, Tony.
That wasn't any work.